Now, before we get into performing these chords and chord progressions, we need to know how to set this up on the controller. I'm using the Ableton push over here, so let's see how we can access specific modes where we can play chords and chord progressions. Right now, I'm in session view. If I tap this button here, we switch to this note view. So every pad here represents a note from a specific scale. If I click on the scale button here, I can access and see which scale I'm working with right now. So right now it's set to a C major scale. I can change it to any other scale that's available over here. And I can change the root by tapping any of these buttons over here. All right, so I'm going to switch back to C major. Let's talk about these colored pads versus the white pads. The colored pad represents the root note. So if we're in C major, this represents the note C. This is a C. They're all Cs. Now you may notice that when I tap on a particular note, some other LEDs also light up. And the controller is just letting us know that that same note can be played over here or over here. All right, now let's talk about the layout. Right now, this instrument is laid out in fourths, kind of like a guitar. So if I go upwards vertically, these are all fourths in the key of C major. If I go horizontally, we get individual notes of the scale. There are different modes here. There's also the thirds mode. So now as we go up vertically, these are individual thirds, but horizontally, it's still the individual notes of the scale. There is one other mode, and if you work with the Novation Launchpad Pro, it works exactly the same way. On the left, we have the root, and as we go up, we get octaves. Same over here. And in between, we have the notes of the scale. So this is not a very common mode, but there are some uses for it. So for example, if I was to play a particular chord, so this is a triad, it sounds a bit muddy in this lower register, so I can just easily move my finger above to transpose that note an octave above. Let's say this note I want to transpose up 2 octaves above. I can play it here. Now we've seen that the sequential mode is helpful for creating chord inversions, but I'm going to switch back to the fourths mode because it's more common, it's much easier to work with. There's one more option over here. If I tap this button, I can switch from in key to chromatic. You will notice that in chromatic mode, we have some unlit pads, whereas in key, it's all completely lit. Because in key, no matter which pad you press on, it'll always be a note from the scale. But when we switch to chromatic mode, we have access to the individual chromatic notes. So all the unlit pads are the chromatic notes. So just to give you an example, if I was to just play the lit keys, this is essentially a C major scale. But if I was to include the unlit pads, it would be the chromatic scale. I'm going to switch back to in key, and that's a quick look at the settings on the push for performing chords and chord progressions.